And with me now, a Democratic senator from New Jersey, Senator Cory Booker, who, of course, is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thank you for being here. We have just learned this evening that tomorrow's Judiciary Committee vote on Todd Blanche is now postponed. Do you expect Senators John Cornyn and Thom Tillis to ultimately pull their support, or is this it?
We'll see. I think that they're in negotiations with the White House over something that should have been settled a long time ago. This slush fund and the tax immunity that they're getting is just so outrageous. But this is just one of the many disqualifying things about Todd Blanche. So I'm hoping people will continue to speak up. And perhaps this is one of those moments where somebody that is so screamingly unqualified for this position or disqualified for this position might actually fail.
And yet the president thinks that Cornyn is not thinking about that. He's thinking about settling a political score. Cornyn, of course, says that he's not. But do you read something personal into this, or is this something different and distinct to you?
Look, there's no love lost between them. That's clear. But what Cornyn seems to be bringing up is something that should outrage all Americans, is that this slush fund that could be used for people like the folks that stormed the Capitol, that beat police officers, that this fund is just unjust and not right, just like judges have, at least one judge has said. And then you add to that the fact that this is something that Donald Trump really wants, which is tax immunity. Remember, this is a guy who's made over $1 billion in office. His sons are raking in the cash in their dealings with foreign nations and contractors with the federal government. And what this slush fund and this deal gets them is tax immunity. If here they are potentially breaking a lot of laws, but suddenly they could keep unjust enrichment, even if they're violating tax laws, if this thing goes through. So I think it's substantive on its face, and I'm glad that that might be something that we see, which is in writing that this is over. But ultimately, I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm glad to see the two of them standing strong. And I hope we see more Republicans come forward and do the same.
And Senator, the idea that somebody who wants to be the Attorney General of the United States would not do the very thing they would require of a criminal defendant who wanted to plead guilty, for example, or somebody who's a party to a contract, that he will not put in writing what he is professing publicly, that speaks volumes to me as a former prosecutor, that he might not have a handle on the credibility of the institution and what a court would say if we took those actions.
Yeah, this is the insanity of the moment we're living in, and I hope Americans heard what you just said. We are living in a reality where the person that's going to be the highest law enforcement official in our country isn't doing the basic things that a first-year associate would be required to do at any law firm. This is a guy who has broken ethics laws, who's broken the rule of avoiding the appearance of improprieties, who broke a bipartisan Epstein law that said he had to release the Epstein files. He didn't even meet the deadlines. And then when he finally released the documents, he redacted all the powerful people and from accountability, but released the names of the victims and their telephone numbers and their addresses and images. Any one of these things should be disqualifying. Any one of these things should get you disbarred. And yet this guy is going forward in a position as acting, still going after people like Comey for seashells in the sand. Thank God we have two Republicans that are speaking not about all of these things, but at least they've picked a couple things that is absolutely absurd. How could it come to this, that we continue to let Donald Trump put such unserious people up for such serious national security positions?
Well, let's talk about the prospect, maybe a hypothetical. We don't know how this is going to end. But let's just say that Blanche's nomination really is blocked. What would be to stop Trump from just keeping him on as an acting attorney general? What would be the recourse you would take to stop his tenure?
Well, there are limits to the length of time somebody can be acting. And obviously, we would do everything we can to enforce those limits. But let's be clear. Donald Trump has made it clear to everybody, whether it's the D&I head or with Pulte or this position with Blanche, he only wants people in powerful positions that will do exactly what he tells them to do. And that is the problem. And that's why less than 100 days from now, this election is so vital, because right now, no one is holding him or his agencies accountable for the jobs they swore an oath to do. And we're seeing Donald Trump pervert the noble missions of a lot of these institutions, like the Department of Justice, and no one's calling him to account.
Senator Cory Booker, thank you so much.
Thank